Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. I want to welcome you here. My name is Father Cy Peel. I'm a Jesuit, and I'm a professor of physics here in Higgins and in physics. And I'm also the moderator of Alpha Sigma Nu. And along with Alpha Sigma Nu, the Center for Ignatian Spirituality sponsors this last lecture. And it's a wonderful opportunity to have someone on campus to share his wisdom of the years with us this evening. So let me say a little bit about, I know there's many friends of Professor Taggart here today, but for those people who may not realize all the wonderful things that he's been doing, I'd like to give a little bit of a bio. Bob has been a professor of finance at Boston College's Carroll School of Management since 1989. He previously held faculty appointments at Boston University, Northwestern University, as well as visiting appointments at the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston, Harvard Business School, MIT's Sloan School of Management. He served as the editor of Financial Management from 1984 to 1987, and as the corporate finance editor of the Journal of Economics and Business from 1993 to 2015. He was also the president of the Financial Management Association from 1989 to 1990. During his long years at Boston College, Bob has served as the finance department chair, as the interim dean of the Carroll School, and as the Carroll School's associate dean for graduate programs. From 2005 until 2017, he served as Boston College's faculty athletics representative and chair of the Athletics Advisory Board. He was also president of the Atlantic Coast Conference from 2012 to 2013. Professor Taggart received his BA in mathematics from Amherst College and his PhD in economics from Massachusetts Institute of Technology across the river. His primary teaching and research interests are in corporate finance and capital markets. His publications have appeared in the Journal of Finance, Financial Management, the Journal of Money, Credit and Banking, Financial Analysts Journal, and other journals in finance and economics. He's the author of the Quantitative Analysis for Investment Management, which is published in a book published in 1996. Part of the reason the Alpha Sigma Nu, the Jesuit Honor Society, and the Center for Ignatian Spirituality holds last lecture is to actually honor someone who has been a leading member, really, in many ways, of the family here at Boston College on the Heights. People who have contributed in many ways, some known, some unknown, but Bob stands out as a shining example of someone who's has given more than most people actually realize. I've mentioned, in talking to some of his colleagues and former students, they've mentioned the sense of wisdom, a sense of patience, and also a sense of service to the community here of scholars and students that has really gone beyond the call. So I want to introduce Bob and thank him for coming to give this last lecture. I also want to present him with an award, which is an actual award for the last lecture here. It's in honor of not only his scholarship, but his friendship to many. There you go. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for being here. I was highly honored when Father Appeal invited me to give this year's talk, but the term last lecture gave me pause. I'm not scheduled to retire for another year, I thought. Does Father Appeal know something that I don't know? However, he reassured me that last lecture is not to be taken literally. It simply connotes, as he put it, an opportunity to reflect on your experience of teaching and administration here at Boston College. So, how did I get here, where I'm standing right now? The short answer is that I walked over from my office in Fulton Hall. It wasn't far, and it was approximately a straight line. But if I rephrase the question as, how did my professional life evolve, and how did it bring me to BC, that required a much longer journey that was anything but straight. My first contact with BC came in the spring of 1966, so it's been a very long relationship, though not a continuous one. I was a 19-year-old sophomore at Amherst College, and I was playing second base in a game against BC. I came away from that encounter with two impressions of BC. First, gee, those guys are pretty good baseball players. And second, wow, those guys have really cool uniforms. I especially like the maroon and gold trim. Now let's move ahead to the end of my junior year. It suddenly dawned on me that I should start thinking about what to do after college. I was a math major, but the math courses I took were abstract, and I wasn't sure how to use them. I wanted, or so I thought, to do something in the real world. Suddenly it occurred to me, say, there are numbers in business, and I could work with numbers. Maybe I should go to business school. Of course, going to school was all I knew at the time, so I don't think it ever occurred to me to start an actual job right after graduation. But when I went to see an economics professor I knew to present my grand plan, he shook his head and said, "Oh no, don't get an MBA. Do you realize how many people get MBAs in this country every year?" That number, incidentally, was about 1/8 then what it is and has been in recent years. Anyway, he continued, "You should get a PhD in economics. That will set you apart from the crowd." So I thought a PhD would be like an MBA, only better. Maybe I could be a bank economist or something like that. I went through my senior year feeling my future was settled. It was just a question of which economics PhD program would accept me. Come April, I was accepted to two, MIT, here in the Boston area, and the University of Michigan in my home state. MIT's was considered one of the top few economics programs, and Michigan's was considered very good, but not quite in the same league. It seemed like an easy choice, but I hesitated. All through high school and college, I'd been on a treadmill. I'd done well academically, but it wasn't much fun. In high school, it was work like crazy to get into a good college. In college, it was work like crazy to get into a good graduate program, which then earned you the right to work like crazy some more to get a good job. Once you had a good job, you could work like crazy till you dropped dead. I wanted to step off that treadmill. Being a grind wasn't satisfying. In fact, the part of college life that had given me the most satisfaction was being a member of the baseball team. That was the only time I felt part of a community, a group that was working together. The rest had just been solitary labor. The day before the decision deadline was a beautiful April Sunday. The sun was shining, the air was soft, flowering trees were in bloom. I was sitting on a hill overlooking the baseball field, trying to decide. I envisioned myself at MIT, grinding away in a musty library with all the other wonks. Then I envisioned myself at Michigan, sitting under a tree in the quad on beautiful days, flipping through easy assignments. That was more like it. It was time to do something for myself. I was going to Michigan. But it was Sunday, and there was neither voicemail nor email then. I had to wait until Monday to phone in my decision from a rotary dial phone. When I awoke Monday, my resolve was gone. What would my professors think of me for turning down a great opportunity? How could I live with myself? I called MIT and accepted their offer. Much later, I realized my thinking had been all wrong. Any graduate program in economics teaches pretty much the same material, so I would have had to work just as hard at Michigan. I'm pretty sure in retrospect that none of those people I envisioned lounging around the quad were PhD students. The primary difference was that my job prospects were better coming out of MIT. So purely from the lucky fact that I was unable to phone in the wrong decision on Sunday, I wound up phoning in the right decision on Monday. I'm reminded of the Yankees Hall of Fame pitcher of the 1930s and 40s, Vernon Lefty Gomez. In one inning of a game, opposing batters scorched 3-line drives off him to the deepest parts of the outfield, but all 3 were run down by his fielders for outs. Returning to the dugout after the inning, Lefty just shrugged and remarked, "I'd rather be lucky than good." When I arrived at MIT that fall, I was jolted by 3 shocks. First, I compared notes on career aspirations with my new classmates, and they all wanted to be college professors. What? That had never even crossed my mind. In my naivete, I hadn't even understood that's what PhD programs are for. No one wanted to be a bank economist. No one wanted to work in the real world. The second shock was that despite their misguided ambitions, my classmates were not the one-dimensional automatons I had envisioned. They had other interests besides economics and were enjoyable to be around. Some of us even formed an economics department intramural softball team, and I was able to recapture some of that team camaraderie that I had enjoyed in college. But the worst shock was that I hated the classes, which I found completely abstract. I wasn't learning anything that seemed applicable to the real world. I completed a master's degree and left the program. But I didn't step into the real world. The job I was able to find was teaching economics classes at a small college in Detroit. I found that I did like teaching, and I enjoyed the students. It was basically a commuter school, and many of the students were working full-time while going to school. They were eager to learn and asked very good questions. In fact, I started doing a lot of reading on the side so that I could answer those questions. This in turn helped rekindle my interest in economics, and especially in the financial aspects of economics. After 2 years away, I returned to graduate school. This time I knew much better what to expect, and I had already completed the required courses in micro and macroeconomic theory and econometrics, so I had much more discretion over my courses. Students were required to designate 3 areas of concentration within economics, and fortuitously, one of my original classmates informed me that finance could be used as one of the 3, even though the courses were offered through the business school. I was much happier in my second go-round. At last, I was learning something that I thought I could use in the real world. It was a very exciting time to be learning about finance because new ideas were sweeping the field. Let me briefly sketch 2 of them. One was the efficient market concept, which argues that intense investor competition for profits should cause new information to be quickly reflected in stock and bond prices. As a result, it should be difficult, other than by pure luck, to earn superior trading profits consistently. In other words, you really should rather be lucky than good. The second new theory goes by the fancy name, capital asset pricing model, but it reflects the old saw, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Dividing your investments among many different securities can reduce your exposure to company-specific risks. The risk of a broadly diversified portfolio is primarily market risk, that is, swings in the value of the overall market. Thus, investors should be concerned with a given security's exposure to market risk, which can be indicated by a statistical measure known as beta. Together, these 2 theories have had an important impact on real-world practice. They have led, for example, to the introduction of index funds, which now account for more than 17% of the wealth invested in all common stocks. I dug deeper into finance until in the spring of 1974, it was time to find a job. I was also going to be married in June, so my fiancée, Karen, had to be in on the decision. She was from a large family, all of whom had spent most of their lives in Massachusetts, so remaining in the Boston area was her clear preference. Based on my earlier experience, I was no longer ruling out a university teaching job, but I still yearned to prove myself in the real world. Several potential jobs failed to materialize, and finally, 2 possibilities remained. I had an offer to teach finance at Northwestern University in the Chicago area. That was a good job, but it was a long way from Boston, and I did not perceive it as going into the real world. The second was a local economic consulting firm, which sold forecasts of economic activity to corporate clients. That seemed like something my graduate training suited me for, but I hadn't yet received an offer. The final interview was a one-on-one meeting with a company principal who told me the firm was trying to expand its client base by also selling its forecasts to portfolio managers. Because of my finance background, he thought that I might be able to speak the portfolio manager's language. Right away, I felt queasy. The firm's forecasts were based on publicly available economic data, so in an efficient securities market, any implications of that information should already be reflected in stock prices. And even if the forecast did contain useful stock picking information, the firm was willing to sell them to anyone, so any advantage they conferred should be quickly competed away. I asked my interviewer how to frame my sales pitch, and he replied, "You just tell them it will reduce their risk." Still feeling uneasy, I asked him how he was measuring risk. "Measuring it?" he asked incredulously. Then he suddenly exploded. "Oh my God! You're not one of those beta guys, are you?" "Listen, kid," he continued, starting to pound the desk with his fist. "Risk is what makes people wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. That's what risk is. It's not beta." I didn't get the job. I also concluded that maybe I wasn't as ready to conquer the real world as I had imagined. So Karen and I went off to Evanston, Illinois, and Northwestern. In early fall, I attended an orientation session for new faculty, conducted by the School of Management's Associate Dean. I was expecting a speech, but he just asked us if we had questions. One of my new colleagues asked, "What are the expectations here for junior faculty members?" And I thought, great question. It should take up at least 15 or 20 minutes of this 30-minute meeting while he explains to us that we need to do a good job teaching classes, develop a solid research program, perform some service activities for the department at school, and blah, blah, blah. But instead, he responded, "We expect you to do high-quality research and publish it in the top journals in your field. We expect quite a few publications. If you're not able to accomplish that within the next 5 years, you'll be terminated." Whoa, I thought. Kind of harsh. Maybe this is the real world. After 2 years, I liked my classes and my colleagues, and I was having modest success with publishing papers, but I still wasn't satisfied. I had the nagging sense that what I did had no effect on people in business. Then in the spring of 1976, the head of the research department at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston called and offered me a job. Great, I thought. Our family, which now included our newborn son Mike, can go back to Boston, and my research will affect public policy rather than just gathering dust in academic journals. That didn't prove very satisfying either. The research department wasn't a community. It was just a group of economists working on individual research projects. I had a great deal of discretion over what I worked on, but other economists' projects were largely unconnected, and I couldn't see that any of the projects had much impact on public policy. At the end of 1 year, we went back to Northwestern. That also ended my fixation on doing something in the real world. For better or for worse, I had become an academic lifer. The year did have one pleasant side effect, my second contact with BC. A number of my graduate school friends were still around Boston during that summer of 1977, so we revived our economics softball team in the MIT Summer Intramural League. Joe Quinn and Don Richter, members of our original team, were now economics faculty members at Boston College. Joe and I went way back. We had been undergraduates together at Amherst and graduate students together at MIT. I didn't know then that we'd later be at BC together for 30 years. We can't shake each other. But that's getting ahead of the story. At the time, Joe recruited another BC colleague, Marv Krause, and a couple of BC graduate students to join us. Here's an old photo of our motley crew. Joe is in the second row, far right, not looking much like the distinguished Dean of Arts and Sciences or interim provost he later became. Marv is also standing in the second row, standing right next to Joe. But talking with these BC-affiliated teammates that summer, I did form the impression that BC might be a good place to work. Back at Northwestern, life went well for several years. Our older daughter Alice was born, we had friends, I was eventually promoted to associate professor. The downturn began when I was named department chairman. I found myself pleading with faculty to teach a particular course or go out to dinner with a new faculty candidate. Please, they had no trouble ignoring. This was not a team effort and no fun. On top of that, my best friend on the faculty, a trusted mentor, decamped for Stanford. Then, unexpectedly, an invitation came to be a visiting faculty member at Harvard Business School for 2 years. There was even a hint that if things worked out, they might offer me a permanent position. Here was a way to go back to Boston to a highly regarded school. I jumped at it thinking, this will be permanent. After all, once Harvard sees what I can do, how could they not want me? But they didn't. As the 2 years drew to a close, they said, thanks for your visit and have a nice life. We were reconciling ourselves to going back to Northwestern when another unexpected offer materialized, this time for a permanent faculty position at BU. That was a way for our family, which now also included our younger daughter Mary, to remain in Boston. But I'm sure that this audience can readily understand that I was reluctant to go to BU. We wrestled with the decision, but it finally came down to a belief that Boston would be better for our family. I took the BU job. Around this same time, I began another endeavor. The editorship of a journal, Financial Management, came open, and a friend from another school encouraged me to apply for it. I did, and wound up getting the job for a term of 3 years. When a paper was submitted to the journal, I would identify 2 reviewers who knew something about the paper's subject. The reviewers would send me comments and a recommendation to accept, reject, or most frequently, return the paper to the author for revision. The reviewers' recommendations were not always consistent, and even if both recommended revisions, their suggestions were frequently different. It was my job to tell the author which suggestions I wanted emphasized. The process was often imperfect. Reviewers could be irresponsible about submitting timely reviews, and authors could be recalcitrant about heeding reviewers' suggestions. But when it worked, it could be highly effective. Seeing a paper go from promising but incomplete and unpolished to one that I was proud to publish in the journal gave me a new form of professional satisfaction. It took a true team effort, requiring the reviewers, authors, and me all to do our jobs. When my term was up, it left a void, and that was compounded by my being named department chairman again, a job that my editorship had shielded me from. I needed to find something new to satisfy my craving for professional satisfaction. By now, I've gone on at some length and I haven't even reached BC yet. I told you it would be a long, winding road. So how did I make that final 4-mile journey up Com Ave from BU? Well, academic communities in particular fields are often relatively small. People get to know one another, so I became acquainted with a few members of BC's finance department. In the late 1980s, that group was launching an ambitious effort to expand and upgrade. They were starting a PhD program and needed additional faculty. They asked if I would like to join them and help get their new PhD program underway. So I came out to take a look. During the interview process, I was sent to meet Father Bill Neenan, the academic vice president at the time, who said 2 things I've never forgotten. First, he described how he came to BC himself. He had been on the economics faculty at the University of Michigan and had come to BC for a year's sabbatical. As he put it, I fell in love with the place and never left. I was both taken aback and intrigued. I'd never been in love with an institution in my life, but I thought, wouldn't it be great to feel that way about the place where you work? His second statement came in response to my question, what would you like to see in a new senior faculty member here? I expected Father Neenan to say something about research leadership, serving as a mentor to junior faculty, helping build the PhD program, etc. But all he said was, we'd like you to be a good university man. That was entirely new to me. There was something different about BC. At every other school, colleagues would warn me to guard my time for research and shield myself from onerous administrative assignments. In contrast, Father Neenan's response implied being part of the larger team and embracing opportunities to serve. That appealed to me. I had always found satisfaction in team efforts, but those had been scarce in academia. Father Neenan's words had hooked me. I was going to BC in the fall of 1989. That ended my job hopping days, but not my travels. Having just accepted a job here, I'm amazed in retrospect how little I really knew about BC. I knew it was closer to our home in Needham than BU, that BC had a pleasant campus, and that the teams still wore really cool looking uniforms. I knew BC was a Catholic school, but I had no idea what it meant that it was both a Catholic and a Jesuit school. My resolve to be a good university man was tested immediately when Don White, the Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, came by to ask if I would serve on the University Research Council. It seemed like an interesting committee and not overly burdensome, so I agreed. A day or two later, Father Neenan called, saying that he had a favor to ask. I thought that this was the official invitation to join the University Research Council. Eager to show that I was a good university man, I said, "Why, sure, Father, I'll be happy to do you a favor. You just name it." "Great," he replied. "I'd like you to serve on the University Core Curriculum Task Force." I was stunned. This was heavy lifting. It entailed a re-examination of the entire core curriculum for BC undergrads. It meant 2-hour meetings every week for an entire semester, but I was stuck. The email that went out announcing this talk raised the question, if granted the possibility to give a last lecture, what wisdom would you impart to the world? Well, I'm not sure I have any wisdom to impart, but I do have one small bit of advice. Before you agree to something, it's a good idea to know what you're agreeing to. Despite my rash act, the task force proved a good experience. I learned more about the philosophy behind the university's liberal arts core, and especially about the Jesuit educational tradition. I met many faculty members and administrators from all parts of the university, including John Mahoney, a legendary professor of English, and Father Bob Barth, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. They were important figures in the university, but I was struck that whenever I saw either one afterward, he always said hello, and he always remembered my name. There really is something different about BC. As time passed, I grew to enjoy BC more and more. I loved my classes and students. I got to know and appreciate my colleagues. My whole family participated in BC events. Karen and I joined a group of faculty members who attended the plays in Robsham Theater. Different combinations of our children would join me for BC football, basketball, and hockey games. Later, our son Mike attended BC, earning both a BA from A&S and a master's degree from the School of Education. Our daughter Alice earned an MBA degree from the Carroll School. And although our daughter Mary never joined a BC degree program, she did work for 2 summers while she was in college in the Carroll School's graduate admissions office. And my longtime Carroll School friend, Father Rich McGowan, performed her wedding ceremony. Was it all great? Of course not. No place is paradise on earth. The PhD program was slow in getting underway because it wasn't easy convincing good students to join a program that had no track record of placing its students. A few of my younger colleagues were denied tenure and were bitter about it. After a few years, I became department chairman again, and I didn't enjoy it any more than I had at BU or Northwestern. But those were aberrations. I consistently found joy and satisfaction through my teaching, but also through assignments I took on for either the Carroll School or the university. Joining the MBA core design and implementation team was a highlight. The core curriculum for the Carroll School's full-time MBA students took up the entire first year of the program, with electives available only in the second year. The Associate Dean wanted us to revamp that curriculum to enable students to complete the core sooner, leaving room for some electives in the first year. We faced 2 problems. First, our group represented each academic department in the Carroll School. How could we shorten the core if at least one of us would vehemently oppose seeing his or her discipline deleted? We addressed this issue by shortening each core class to a half-semester format. This meant cutting some material from each of the core courses, but the burden fell on all departments equally, so it was easier to swallow. Second, how are we going to get the Carroll School faculty as a whole to approve the redesign without nitpicking it to death until we were back where we started? To work around this, we struck a bargain. Our committee would redesign the core, we would make regular progress reports to the faculty, soliciting inputs, and then we would teach the new curriculum ourselves for a trial period of 2 years. After that, the faculty could vote on the whole package. The work was exhilarating. We all wanted to make the curriculum work because we'd have to teach it. The new design went into effect in the fall of 1995, and the first few classes of MBA students thereafter seemed to share our excitement at being part of something new. While many changes to the specifics have occurred in the ensuing years, the same basic design is still in place. I was also asked to serve on the program committees for 4 major economics and finance conferences that BC staged between 1994 and 2004. They were organized through the office of BC's Senior Vice President, Jim McIntyre, and they were ambitious undertakings, attracting large audiences. Speakers included a U.S. Labor Secretary, 2 U.S. Treasury Secretaries, the Chairman of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the CEOs of Comcast and IBM, and on 2 occasions, Alan Greenspan, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. What impressed me most, though, was not the distinction of the speakers or the scale of the conferences, but the deft way in which Jim McIntyre coordinated everyone's efforts. Our group, representing the President's Office, the Offices of Communication, Advancement, Audiovisual, Information Technology, and Parking, plus the Bureau of Conferences, the BC Police Department, and the Carroll School. It was not easy getting such a disparate group to pull together. But Dr. McIntyre would cite tasks that needed doing and then turn to the relevant individual and ask, "Do you think you could help us with that?" And he never forgot to single out the same individual afterwards, saying, "Thank you for all you're doing for us." It made everyone feel an important part of the team and spurred everyone to a greater effort. I hope that some of his organizational skills rubbed off on me, but it was truly learning at the feet of a master. My ability to do a good Jim McIntyre impression was soon tested. I was in my office in August 1999 getting ready for fall classes when word came that Jack Newhouser, Carroll School's dean for the previous 22 years, wanted to convene a meeting of some senior faculty members right away. He told us he had abruptly and unexpectedly been named BC's academic vice president. There was no time to initiate a formal search for his successor, so we wanted to know if any of us would serve a year as interim dean while a search was conducted. No one raised a hand. Later, he came around to us individually, putting the same question more forcefully. I was reluctant, having no clear idea of what the job entailed. However, a voice in the back of my head kept asking, would a good university man be willing to take that on? So I found myself in the dean's office for a year. It was, at least, a very nice office. It proved to be a good year. I got to know many new people, both inside and outside the Carroll School. It was also an opportunity to be a spokesperson for the school, forcing me to consider and articulate what the school was about. I especially liked participating in the ceremonial occasions like commencement. It was a thrill to speak into the incredibly powerful sound system in Alumni Stadium. The sound vibrates through your whole body, and it comes down from speakers high above, making you wonder, is that my voice? Or is that the Lord speaking? Best of all, I spent the year knowing that this wasn't really my job. I wasn't expected to come up with major initiatives. My charge was, just don't screw up. So I made it through the year, and Fulton Hall was still standing. A new dean had been hired, and I was thinking about being a faculty member again. Then our associate dean for graduate programs decided this transition period would be a good time to step down. That was a blow to the school, since he had done a great job breathing new life into the MBA program. He had been revered by students and staff members. Who could we get who would be dumb enough to try to fill those shoes? Our new dean said to me, I'd like you to do it. This time it really was my job. I wasn't just filling in. Making things worse, a few of the departing associate dean's key staff members followed him out the door. It was a little rocky at first. We needed to hire several new people quickly, and the students needed reassurance that their program wasn't disintegrating. As in the past, though, I was amazed at the strength of the BC community spirit. Students, faculty, and staff members all pulled together, and the program moved on. I had always enjoyed working with MBA students throughout my academic career, but now I got to know them not just through class, but all parts of the program, and in a few cases, through aspects of their personal lives. There are two classmates who married each other. A highlight was my own daughter Alice joining the MBA program in the fall of 2004. She was a student in my core financial management class, so each of us got to see what the other was like outside the house. She graduated in 2006, which was my last year as associate dean, and it was a thrill to preside over her degree ceremony and hand her diploma to her. During the summer of 2005, I was looking ahead toward my last year as associate dean when I had a call from Father Leahy's office asking me if I could meet with him that afternoon. What is it about minding my own business in my office during the summer that makes me a magnet for new assignments? Father Leahy asked if I would serve as BC's faculty athletics representative. I had heard of the position, but I had no idea what it entailed. At Father Leahy's suggestion, I talked to the current incumbent, but it sounded like a lot of work. I wasn't sure I could handle it alongside other responsibilities. Then the voice in the back of my head asked again, would a good university man be willing to do that? You know the answer. The job had many facets, one of which was attending 5 or 6 Atlantic Coast Conference meetings per year in various locations, sometimes in conjunction with another ACC event. Groups that met included the faculty reps from all the ACC schools, athletic directors, and senior women athletics administrators. One meeting each year also included the head coaches of football and men's and women's basketball. There was a certain wow factor, as in, wow, there's Coach K sitting right over there. Meeting topics consisted of each year's NCAA legislative proposals, ACC rules and regulations, competition scheduling, the awarding of scholarships for postgraduate study to selected ACC student athletes, and the sharing of best practices in athletics program administration. Other facets of the job occurred here at BC. I was part of a team that reviewed all BC varsity athletes each year to make sure they met NCAA academic eligibility requirements. I was involved with compliance issues and with the academic support unit for BC student athletes. I was responsible for organizing and chairing meetings of the Athletics Advisory Board, a 10-member group of BC faculty members and academic administrators charged with keeping ourselves and the rest of the BC community informed about the workings of the athletics program. I compiled reports for the president and provost on practice and competition schedules for all varsity teams and on BC student athletes who left school during the preceding year before completing their undergraduate degrees. I did this job for 12 years, and I still think the Eagles have the coolest uniforms. More important, it was an opportunity to work with a whole new set of communities. These included BC's coaches, the athletics administrative staff, athletics advisory board members, the faculty reps from all the ACC schools, and the ACC staff members. Before I started, I thought I knew something about college sports. Having been a participant and a lifelong fan, I discovered I had no idea of the complexity of the enterprise and the work that takes place behind the scenes of the competition. I developed new respect for those student athletes, and there are quite a few, who balance very demanding practice and competition schedules with high academic achievement. And I got to see firsthand how athletes who play in front of small crowds and get little public attention put just as much of themselves into their sports as the athletes you read about in the sports section. I would be remiss if I concluded without mentioning the impact the Jesuit influence at BC has had on me. I'll highlight three aspects that I found particularly important. First, it's a joyful influence. I've participated in several halftime retreats for undergraduates, and I love watching Father Michael Himes' videos on vocational discernment. He urges students to ask themselves the questions, what am I good at? And what does the world need me to be? But the very first question is, what brings me joy? Perhaps surprisingly, this joyful influence is even evident at funeral services. The funeral masses for Father Bob Barth, Father Bill Neenan, and Jim McIntyre, whose positive influences I've already cited, come especially to mind. Yes, there's sadness that those individuals are no longer among us, but there's also a strong sense of celebration of their lives and joy that their memory lives on. Second, there's the Jesuit emphasis on the importance of liberal arts, a feeling I share. I may have been a business school guy for 45 years, but I have no business school degrees. My entire education has been in the liberal arts. I might be seen as really an A&S guy, albeit one in Wolf of Wall Street clothing. And third, I'll cite cura personalis, care for the whole person. That's how BC has treated me. I've never felt like just an employee drawing a paycheck, although I'll admit the checks have been welcome. Cura personalis has given me a different outlook on my relationships with students. It's not just about how well or poorly a particular student does in class. My relationships with students have been far more fulfilling here than elsewhere. So that's the long version of how I got to this spot. I've had a very fortunate life. I've been taken in by some wonderful communities along the way. These include, of course, my family, several members of which are here today, including the youngest member in the lower right-hand corner there. But also the students, academic colleagues and staff members, the athletics community, and the Jesuit community. It's been a long, winding journey, but thanks to them, it's been a joyful trip. Thank you all very much for joining me for the ride.
Bob, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and also proving yourself to be a university man. So good. I was wondering if anyone might have a question. We're all kind of academically inclined here, so and it's a classroom, so perhaps someone might have a question for Bob.
Yes,
Professor
Dave?
Taggart, when you look back, is there one particular achievement that you feel most proud of? If you had to pick one.
I think the being on the MBA core design and implementation team. It was a group that really worked well together, and we implemented the curriculum, and it worked, and a lot of it is basically still in place. So I'm quite proud of that. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think I can speak for a lot of the MBA students and saying that we're all grateful for how you relate to students. And I'm curious how that developed for you, or whether it just kind of, you came that way, but how you developed these great relationships with students.
Well, it did take a while to develop, and I guess it started the year, which I hadn't mentioned in my talk, that I was a visiting faculty member at MIT, and so I was teaching the introductory finance class. Although they had 3 different versions. There was Finance Light, which you could take that was a half semester long, and then there was Finance Semi-Light, which was a full semester, but met only 2 times a week. And then there was Finance Heavy, which they assigned me to teach, which meant 3 times a week for the entire semester. So I get to tell the students everything I knew about finance. It was, and they seemed to appreciate it. So I got to really know a bunch of the students. A couple of them invited me to lunch, and so that really started me thinking that it was about more than just standing up in front of the class and delivering the material. It was it made it a lot more fun if you got to know the students as people. Yes.
Having your daughter in the program must have been so special. What is your favorite memory or interesting, awkward interaction? Something that stands out to you guys? Because that must have been so cool to be in the same room, experiencing each other like in that situation.
Yeah,
Maybe she can answer for us.
Well, I did. She used to report to me that some of her classmates, when I was teaching the finance class, would say, "Alice, get your dad to give us some of the questions in advance so we can study those." But it was it was fun having Alice in class, and then it was also fun that she was around Fulton Hall, and so if she just wanted to stop by and say hello, she could and did, and that was terrific. Alice.
To comment from my own experience, I would say that I definitely did a lot better in finance than I would have, because I was paying attention, and that otherwise I would have thought, I don't understand this, I'm gonna just zone out. But since it was my dad, I thought, I'm gonna look like such a loser. So I was definitely a little tuned in.
Alice did quite well.
I didn't have a question at the
At the back there.
Yes. Carly.
Yeah, Bob, thank you for everything that you did for us in athletics as our faculty athletic rep. You were very insightful and appreciative for somebody like myself when I came in on staff. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of your shock and awe that you mentioned earlier about being exposed to athletics, and any highlights or anything that you'd like us to hear about that experience?
Sure. Well, it was, part of it was that I knew almost nobody in athletics, so it was a whole new set of people to get to know, which was great, and they were terrific. You know, they seemed to enjoy working together, and but you know, boy, do you guys ever work hard. I mean, it was, you know, I thought athletics was about, you know, you go to practice and you put on your uniform and show up for the game, and that's about it. But there's a lot, you know, I hadn't realized anything about the compliance or all of the NCAA superstructure that guides everything, not always in a good way. You know, it's just, you know, there's a lot of people, and again, I was really impressed at how hard you guys worked. That was an eye opener.
Well, let's thank the speaker again. Wonderful.